The wind was howling so loud that Cole barely heard the muffled cry, but the dog did. Shadow lunged, pawing at the snow until his teeth clamped onto a hand so cold it didn't flinch. In the moment the girl's fingers wrapped around his, she whispered, "Don't let go." The snow wasn't falling anymore. It was swarming, each flake driven sideways by a wind that could knock a man off balance. Cole leaned forward against it, head low, scanning the empty stretch of white ahead. His radio was dead, frozen stiff hours ago, and the last landmark he'd seen was buried now under at least a foot of fresh powder. Shadow was out in front, a dark shape against the white, the only constant in the shifting storm. His black coat was dusted with ice, but his movements were still sharp, driven. The dog had been tracking something for the last 20 minutes, his nose low, his pace quick but careful. Cole's boots sank deep with every step. Each pull forward took more effort than it should. The air felt heavier now, like the storm itself was pressing him back. Then Shadow stopped. It wasn't a cautious halt like when he scented danger, it was a freeze so abrupt that snow piled against his legs before he moved again. His ears twitched, and then he lunged sideways into the drifts. "Shadow!" Cole called, but his voice vanished in the wind. The dog didn't answer. He dug hard, snow flying up in frantic bursts until his muzzle disappeared into the white. Cole trudged toward him, heart thudding. "What is it? What did you?" Shadow's head came up, jaws clenched around something pale. It was a hand. Cole's first thought was that it was frozen solid, lifeless. But then the fingers twitched, weak and slow. He dropped to his knees, scooping snow away until the arm was free, then the shoulder, then the face. A girl, maybe 17, her lips blue, her eyes barely open. She didn't speak until Shadow released her and she gasped against the wind. Her voice was paper-thin. "Don't, let go." Cole stripped off one glove and grabbed her hand. It was like gripping ice, but the faint squeeze in return told him she was still fighting. He slid his other arm under her shoulders, pulling her up. She was light, too light, but the way her head lolled forward told him she'd been out here a long time. "We're moving," he told her, his voice more for himself than for her. Shadow circled back, barking once into the storm, then took off in a direction that wasn't the one they'd come from. Cole followed. The snow clawed at them with every step. The wind stole heat from his face faster than he could make it. The girl stumbled twice, nearly pulling them both down, but each time her fingers only tightened on his. After the second stumble, he bent to her ear. "We'll stop when I say, not when the storm does." She didn't answer, but her grip told him she'd heard. Shadow veered suddenly to the right, skirting the edge of what looked like a half-buried fence. The posts were ancient, leaning, their tops carved into sharp points. Cole recognized the pattern, old boundary markers. Beyond them, the land dipped down toward the river. That was good. If they could reach the riverbank, they could follow it back toward the outpost. But the girl tensed when she saw the fence. Her voice came again, strained. "Not that way." Cole almost asked why, but something in her tone stopped him. Shadow didn't slow. He cleared the fence with a single bound, landing in snow up to his belly, and kept going. Cole hesitated. The wind shifted for just a second, and he thought he heard something behind them. Not the storm, something heavier, moving through the drifts with purpose. He didn't look back. They crossed the fence. The drop toward the river was steeper than he remembered, the snow deep enough that it muffled every footfall. Shadow's black shape was the only guide in the endless white. Cole's arm was numb now from supporting the girl's weight, but he didn't let go. Her head stayed low, hair plastered to her face with ice. After what felt like forever, Shadow stopped again, this time in front of a dark shape barely visible through the snow. A cabin. Small, half collapsed, but still standing. Cole didn't wait for her approval. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, it was dark but sheltered, the air stale but dry. Shadow circled the room once before settling by the wall. Cole guided the girl to a corner, lowering her gently to the floor. He stripped his gloves and pressed his hands to hers, trying to bring some life back into them. She flinched at the sudden warmth, eyes flicking toward the door. "We shouldn't have come here." Cole frowned. "Why?" Her gaze didn't move from the entrance. Her voice was barely audible. "Because he'll find us faster now." The cabin's walls groaned as the wind hit them, each gust rattling the warped boards like the place was trying to breathe. Snow hissed against the roof, and every so often the sound thinned, letting a different kind of silence creep in, the kind that wasn't empty, but waiting. Cole knelt beside the girl, digging through his pack for the emergency blanket. His gloves made his hands clumsy, but he wasn't about to take them off again. He wrapped the metallic sheet around her shoulders, tucking it in tight, the crinkle of the material loud in the cramped space. "You're freezing," he said. "We'll get your temp up before we move again." She didn't look at him. Her eyes were still fixed on the door. Shadow paced near it, not whining, not barking, just moving back and forth with deliberate steps, his nails clicking softly on the warped wood of the floor. Every few passes, his nose lifted toward the seam where the cold leaked in. Cole followed his gaze to the small, grimy window beside the door. Snow had crusted against the glass in thick swirls, but there was enough of a gap to see the pale blur of the storm beyond. Nothing moved in it. "You want to tell me who you think's coming after you?" he asked. The girl's lips parted slightly, but the pause before her answer stretched long enough that he thought she might not speak at all. "He doesn't leave tracks," she finally said. Cole studied her face. Even under the frostbite and exhaustion, there was something sharp in her eyes now, not panic, but knowledge. The kind people got from living with a truth no one else believed. "You've seen him?" Cole pressed. She nodded, the motion almost imperceptible. "What does he look like?" Her gaze slid to the floor. "You don't see him until he's already close." Shadow stopped pacing. His head tilted slightly, ears forward. Cole felt it a second later, the faintest vibration through the floorboards, like a slow, heavy step. It could have been the wind rattling something outside. But Shadow didn't move when it was just wind. Cole rose silently, moving to the door. He pressed his gloved hand against it, though it felt colder on one side, warmer on the other, like something big was leaning against it just enough to change the air. He glanced back at the girl. "If there's someone out there." "It's not someone." Her voice was still soft, but it cut through the creak of the walls. Cole didn't like the way she said it. Shadow shifted his weight forward, a low rumble starting deep in his chest. Cole checked his rifle out of instinct, but there was something in the air now, not fear exactly, but a pressure that made him second-guess making noise. The metallic crinkle of the emergency blanket sounded far too loud. The girl pulled it tighter around herself, her eyes still locked on the door. Cole moved to the window, wiping a clear patch into the frost. He saw nothing but snow moving sideways. Then, a flicker. Not movement. Not shape. Just a shift. Like the storm's whiteout had thickened in one spot and then thinned again. He turned back to Shadow. The dog's hackles were up, his eyes narrowed, his body perfectly still. The vibration through the floor stopped. For a moment, the cabin was dead silent. Then something scraped along the outside wall. Slow. Deliberate. Not claws, not boots, something broad and flat, like a heavy board being dragged over the wood. The girl flinched but didn't look away. "He knows you're here now." Cole kept his voice low. "If he wanted in, why isn't he?" The scrape stopped, replaced by a faint tapping at the window. 3 taps. Slow. Even. Cole raised his rifle, sight trained on the glass, but the frost made it impossible to see more than the faintest distortion. Shadow barked once, sharp, the sound ricocheting off the cramped walls. The taps stopped. Cole held his breath. Outside, the wind shifted again. Somewhere in the storm, faint but distinct, came a sound that didn't belong, a low, drawn-out exhale, like air being forced through a narrow space. The girl's hand gripped the blanket so hard it crinkled. "He's not here for you," she whispered. "He's here for me." Cole didn't drop his aim. "Then you're going to tell me why?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, her eyes darted toward the floorboards under her. "Because I got away once. And he doesn't let that happen." Shadow moved suddenly, nose pressing to a spot at the base of the far wall. His paws scraped against the warped boards. Cole took a step toward him, and that's when he heard it. From beneath the floor. A single, slow knock. The knock didn't echo. It wasn't wood on wood. It was dull, muted, like someone had tapped from inside a box lined with thick cloth. Cole stayed still for a full 3 seconds, rifle still trained on the frost-misted window. His ears strained against the howl of the wind, waiting. The second knock came. Shadow growled low, teeth showing, his nose almost pressed against the warped boards. His paws shuffled, claws catching in the thin gaps between planks. Cole turned his head just enough to look at the girl. "Is there a crawl space?" She shook her head slowly. "No. Just dirt." Her voice was flat, but her eyes said more. She knew exactly what was under them. Cole stepped toward Shadow, rifle still in one hand. The boards here were old and soft, the kind that creaked if you breathed too hard. He knelt, pressing his gloved palm against them. The wood was cold everywhere except for one strip where it was warmer. Too warm for a floor in an unheated cabin in the middle of a snowstorm. The girl's breathing quickened. "Don't touch it." Cole looked up. "If something's..." The third knock was faster. Louder. The warmth under his hand pulsed once, like a heartbeat. Shadow's growl deepened until it was more vibration than sound. Cole moved back, putting space between himself and the warm boards. He hated the feeling that standing on them might be giving whatever was underneath a target. The girl's hands clutched the blanket until it crackled. Her eyes darted from the floor to the door and back again. "Tell me," Cole said, keeping his voice steady. "What's under there?" Her lips parted. No words came. A crack appeared between two planks, so thin it could have been natural warping, until something pressed up through it. Not a hand. Not anything human. Just the tip of something smooth and gray, like a stone pushed from below. Shadow lunged forward, barking hard enough to shake the walls. The girl screamed, pulling her knees to her chest. The stone slid back under the wood, disappearing. The boards settled as if nothing had happened. Cole scanned the floor, every muscle tight. "We're not staying here." The girl shook her head fast. "You go out there now, you won't make it 10 steps." Shadow paced in a small circle, glancing between them and the door. His ears twitched to every sound, the shifting wind, the faint groans of the wood, the almost imperceptible scrape under the floor. Cole crossed to the window again, clearing more frost. The storm outside was a wall of white, but something in the distance didn't match its motion. It wasn't swaying or drifting, it was standing. "Eyes up," he muttered, more to himself than to the girl. She didn't ask what he saw. She didn't have to. He backed away from the glass, turning toward the fireplace. The hearth was cold, the ashes long dead, but the flue looked wide enough for someone, or something, to have climbed down. He knelt, running his light along the inside. The soot was thick. Too thick. Like it had been disturbed recently and resettled. A soft sound came from behind him. Not a knock this time. A whisper. He turned fast. The girl was still in the corner, but her head was tilted in a way it hadn't been before, eyes glassy, lips barely moving. "What did you say?" he asked. She blinked and seemed to come back to herself. I didn't. The whisper came again. This time Cole heard it clearly. It was coming from under the floor. Not words he could understand, but the tone was wrong, too calm for the situation. It was steady, deliberate, like a chant without language. Shadow's bark cut it off. The dog slammed his paws against the warm spot in the floor, claws tearing at the wood. Shadow, no, Cole started, but it was too late. The board split. A rush of heat blasted upward, carrying with it a smell like wet soil left too long in the dark. Cole stepped back, rifle up. Something shifted below, a mass, slow-moving, pressing against the gap. The girl's voice cut through the noise, urgent. Don't let it see your face. Cole didn't have time to ask. The gap widened as more of the plank gave way. A shape rose just enough for the dim light to touch it, smooth, gray, rounded. It reflected no shine, but the edges rippled as if it were wet. Then it sank again, retreating into the dark below. The floor went still. The whispering stopped. The wind outside surged, slamming against the door so hard the hinges squealed. Cole met Shadow's eyes. We move on my count. The girl stood, swaying on her feet. If you open that door, it will be waiting. Cole glanced between the door and the hole in the floor. Then we find another way. Shadow was already moving toward the back wall, nose low, searching. That's when Cole noticed it, a seam in the boards near the far corner, smaller than a door but bigger than a vent. Shadow pawed at it once, then looked back. Cole crossed the room fast. He hooked his fingers under the edge and pulled. The wood came up with a reluctant groan, revealing a narrow tunnel sloping down into blackness. The heat from below washed over him again. The girl's voice was thin but certain. That's where he came from. Cole didn't stop moving. Then that's where we go. The opening in the floor wasn't much wider than a coffin lid, but the heat rolling out of it felt like standing in front of an open oven. The smell was stronger now, not rot exactly, but the deep, damp scent of earth that hadn't seen light in years. Cole's first instinct was to seal it back up and find another way, but the scrape of something against the outer wall reminded him they didn't have time. Whatever had been under the floor had retreated, but the presence outside hadn't gone anywhere. Shadow stood at the lip of the tunnel, ears forward, tail rigid. His paws shifted like he was ready to jump down without waiting for orders. Cole leaned over, rifle slung across his back, flashlight in hand. The beam reached only a few yards before the tunnel curved away. The walls were packed dirt reinforced with old, splintered boards, and faint grooves in the surface suggested something had been dragged, or crawled, through here many times. He glanced at the girl. She hadn't moved from the corner, but her eyes were locked on the dark opening like it was a wound. You first, she said suddenly. He almost smirked at the boldness, but her tone wasn't a challenge, it was fear disguised as instruction. I'll go, Cole said. But you stay close enough to touch me. If I stop, you stop. She swallowed but nodded. He dropped into the tunnel feet first, boots landing on the packed dirt with a dull thud. The air down here was thick, humid, and unnervingly warm for being directly under a cabin in the middle of a blizzard. Shadow came next, landing with a soft grunt, his nails scraping lightly against the floor as he moved ahead, nose low. The girl slid down last, her thin frame making the descent easier. The emergency blanket was gone, she'd left it upstairs, either on purpose or by accident. Without it, the pale of her skin was stark against the shadows. The tunnel sloped downward, just enough to make footing tricky. Cole led with his flashlight, beam cutting through the dark, revealing more reinforcement beams overhead. Some were cracked, others slick with moisture. Water dripped somewhere ahead, rhythmic and slow. The sound of the wind faded entirely after 30 feet, replaced by the close, oppressive quiet of underground spaces. Even their footsteps seemed swallowed up by the dirt. Where does this go? Cole asked without turning around. The girl's answer was immediate. Down. He waited for more, but she didn't elaborate. Shadow slowed suddenly, his body tense. His head tilted, ears twitching toward the right wall. Cole swung the light there. A set of handprints. Not painted, not carved, pressed directly into the dirt wall, as if someone had shoved their hands in and pulled them out again. The edges were crisp, the impressions fresh enough that small clumps of soil still clung where the fingers had been. Cole's mouth went dry. These weren't here long. The girl's voice was barely audible. He uses the sides to move faster. Cole's grip tightened on the flashlight. And you think we're faster than him? She didn't answer. They kept moving. The slope steepened, forcing them to crouch. The tunnel narrowed to the point that Cole's shoulders brushed the dirt on either side. The warmth increased, beads of sweat forming along his hairline despite the cold seeping into his boots. Ahead, the tunnel forked, one path dropping sharply into blackness, the other sloping more gently but vanishing around a bend. Shadow sniffed both, then looked back at Cole. The girl pointed to the gentler slope. That way. Cole glanced at her. Why not down? Down doesn't end. Her tone left no room for argument. They took the bend. The walls here were wetter, streaked with dark patches where moisture seeped in. The air carried a faint metallic tang, and the floor felt softer underfoot, like the dirt had been turned recently. Shadow froze again. This time, his growl was so low it was almost a vibration in the air. Cole followed his gaze upward. The ceiling of the tunnel here was different, not reinforced, just raw earth. And from that earth, something thin and pale dangled down. At first, Cole thought it was a root. But roots didn't sway slightly when there was no wind. The girl's hand grabbed his sleeve, fingers digging in hard. Don't touch it. He didn't plan to. They moved on, Shadow keeping a wider berth from the walls now. The tunnel widened abruptly into a chamber no bigger than a small bedroom. The ceiling was higher, the walls lined with more reinforcement beams. In the center of the floor was a circular patch of bare earth, smoother than the rest, as if it had been deliberately cleared. Cole stepped closer, shining the light directly onto it, and saw dozens of small impressions in the dirt. Not footprints exactly. More like the marks left by fingertips, dragged. The girl stayed at the edge. This is where he waits. Cole looked up sharply. Then why did you bring us here? Her eyes met his. Because it's safer to meet him here than in the open. Before he could answer, a sound rose from the tunnel behind them, soft at first, then louder, faster. Like hands slapping against wet dirt in quick succession. Shadow barked once, the sound echoing off the chamber walls. Cole turned the light toward the sound. The beam hit the tunnel wall just as something slipped out of view, too fast to make out clearly. The girl stepped into the cleared patch of dirt and crouched, placing her hands palm down against it. Cole stared. What are you doing? Her voice was calm, steady. Making him stop. The chamber's air shifted when she placed her palms on the bare earth. It was subtle, not colder, not warmer, but denser, like the air in a sealed room where someone had been breathing too long. Shadow's bark cut off abruptly. He didn't go quiet from obedience, he went quiet because something made him. His ears flattened, and his body lowered into a defensive crouch, eyes locked on the tunnel they'd just come from. Cole tightened his grip on the flashlight. Step back from that circle, he told the girl. Her fingers flexed against the dirt. If I move, he'll keep coming. Her voice wasn't pleading, it was matter of fact. Cole scanned the tunnel entrance, rifle ready. The sound of slapping hands against wet dirt had stopped, replaced by silence thick enough to make his ears ring. He took one step forward. That's when the first hand appeared. It came slowly, fingers curling over the edge of the tunnel like a spider testing a web. The skin, if it was skin, was the color of wet clay, with no lines, No knuckles, no nails. Just smooth, rounded shapes tapering into blunt tips. The hand gripped the edge, and then a second joined it. They were too long. Even at rest, each finger seemed to move on its own, making minute adjustments in the air. Cole kept his beam on them, jaw clenched. "What is that?" The girl didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the space above the hands, where the rest of it would come. It didn't rise all at once. First came a portion of the head, not a face, just a smooth, curved surface that reflected the light wrong. Not shiny, not matte, something in between, like looking at a shadow trapped in glass. The rest of the head emerged slowly, impossibly smooth, featureless except for a shallow indentation where a mouth should be. Then, movement where eyes should be. Not blinking, not shifting, just opening. They weren't eyes in the human sense. They were patches of darker shadow, absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. Cole's pulse hammered in his ears. Shadow stood frozen, muscles taut, a low growl barely audible. The thing's hands flexed, pressing harder into the packed earth of the chamber floor. Its head tilted slightly, almost curious. The girl's voice was steady. "He's deciding." Cole's gaze snapped to her. "Deciding what?" "Whether to take you now or later." Cole shifted his stance, keeping himself between the creature and the girl. "Then we leave before he makes up his mind." "You can't leave until he lets you," she said. The thing's hands began to press into the floor. Not hard, just enough to leave deep impressions in the packed earth. The sound was faint, almost delicate. Cole's beam shook slightly in his grip, not from fear exactly, but from the unnatural stillness of everything else. The storm above might as well have been a mile away. The girl's hands trembled against the circle. "If I tell him something he wants, he'll let us go." "What does he want?" Cole demanded. Her eyes flicked to him for the first time since the thing appeared. "A name." Cole didn't have time to argue before the creature moved. Not toward them, but to the side, skimming the chamber's wall without touching it. Its movement was fluid but wrong, like the body didn't have bones but still carried weight. Shadow's growl deepened, his body angled to intercept. The thing stopped, tilting its head toward the dog. The shadow patches where eyes should be seemed to widen slightly. Cole stepped forward, putting his flashlight beam directly into those voids. The air temperature shifted instantly, plummeting just enough to fog his breath. The girl's voice came again, urgent this time. "Don't hold the light there." "Why not?" "Because if he sees you too clearly, he'll keep you." Cole angled the beam down, letting it hit the creature's hands instead. They twitched but didn't pull away. The girl leaned closer to the dirt, whispering, not to Cole, but to whatever was in front of them. The words were low, syllables that didn't match any language he knew. The creature's head tilted back toward her. The fingers on its left hand flexed once, then went still. Cole could feel something happening in the room, a tension lifting slightly, like a taut rope being eased. The girl stopped speaking. The creature leaned back into the tunnel. One hand released the floor, then the other. It moved backward without turning, slipping into the dark until only the suggestion of its head remained. Then that, too, vanished. Cole exhaled slowly, lowering the rifle but keeping it ready. "What did you tell it?" She stood, wiping her palms against her legs. "A name." He stared at her. "Whose?" She didn't answer. Shadow moved to the tunnel entrance, sniffing deep. His tail didn't lift, but the tension in his body eased just slightly. The girl turned to Cole. "We can go now." He hesitated. "Go where?" "Up." "But not the way we came." She pointed to another opening on the far side of the chamber, half hidden behind warped boards. Cole approached it, shining his light through. The tunnel beyond angled upward, not steep, but enough to promise an exit eventually. "Move," he said. She stepped into the new tunnel without hesitation, shadow close behind her. Cole glanced once at the tunnel they'd left, half expecting to see those long, pale fingers curling back into view. Nothing. Just darkness. He turned and followed them, the air growing cooler with each step. But halfway up the incline, Cole heard something faint from behind. Not knocking. Not whispering. Just his own name. The new tunnel rose at a gentle slope, just enough to make the air feel fresher with every step. Cole could almost taste the faint trace of snow in it, and for the first time since they'd dropped through the cabin floor, he let himself believe they might actually get out. Shadow padded ahead, his breathing steady, but his ears remained pinned forward. The girl stayed between Cole and the dog, moving quickly, almost like she knew exactly how far this tunnel went. The walls here were tighter, more irregular. The packed dirt had given way to rock in some places, jagged enough that Cole's sleeve snagged once. He kept his light moving over the surfaces, checking for any sign of movement, any hint that those hands might curl out of the shadows again. For a while, the only sound was their own footfalls and the occasional soft drip of water. Then Shadow stopped. Not a slow hesitation, he froze mid-step, muscles rigid, head low. Cole closed the gap fast, rifle up. "What is it?" The dog didn't move. His nose twitched once, then his tail stiffened in a way Cole recognized from dozens of patrols. Something was directly ahead, and it wasn't friendly. Cole swung the light forward. The beam hit nothing but empty tunnel, at first. Then it caught something pale, far ahead, a smear against the darker earth. It wasn't a rock. It was the curve of a hand. Cole felt his chest tighten. The hand was lying palm up in the dirt, fingers curled slightly inward, as if resting. But the way it was angled, it couldn't have belonged to someone standing or crouching. It was too low. Too still. The girl's voice was almost a whisper. "We can't go this way." Cole kept the light on the hand. "Why not?" "Because he's already there." Cole moved the beam slowly upward, expecting to see the rest of the body. But there was nothing, just more tunnel. The hand twitched. Not a spasm, a deliberate, slow curl of the fingers. Shadow's growl vibrated through the narrow space. Cole took one step back, never breaking line of sight. "We turn around." The girl didn't move. "I said," Cole started, but she interrupted, her tone strange. "He's in both directions now." Cole turned sharply, light swinging back down the way they'd come. At first it was just the dark. Then, another hand. This one was gripping the tunnel wall, fingers sunk into the packed dirt like it was soft clay. The distance between them and either hand was maybe 15 yards in both directions. Cole's mind raced. The tunnel was too narrow to sidestep past either one without getting close. The chamber they'd left was only a short way behind, but going back meant dropping straight into the circle where he'd already decided they didn't belong. He glanced at the ceiling. Jagged rock in some places, loose dirt in others. Too unstable to blast or dig. Shadow looked back and forth between the two ends, ears pinned tight, breathing fast now. The girl's hands trembled slightly. "He's not trying to block us. He's trying to close us in." Cole's knuckles whitened on the flashlight. "Then we make him move." He swung the beam forward again, directly onto the first hand. The reaction was immediate, the fingers snapped into the dirt, and something pulled the rest of it into view. It came faster than before. Not crawling exactly, but pulling itself in fluid motions, the way something in water moves, except it wasn't in water. The head emerged next, and now the shadow patches where eyes should be weren't just absorbing the light, they seemed to be pushing it away. The beam slid off them like oil, refusing to settle. The girl's voice came sharp. "Don't let it get all the way into the tunnel." Cole didn't waste time asking why. He swung his rifle forward and fired a single round into the dirt in front of the thing. The sound was deafening in the narrow space, the muzzle flash painting the walls orange for an instant. The creature stopped. The head tilted, slow, deliberate, as if weighing the act. Behind them, the second hand was moving now, pulling forward in perfect sync with the one ahead. Cole's gut told him they couldn't win a standoff in a space this small. He looked at the walls again, searching for anything, a side crack, a crawl space, even a weakness in the dirt. There. A narrow fissure in the right wall, maybe 8 inches wide. It wasn't much, but with enough pressure, maybe they could widen it. He turned to the girl. "You're going in first." Her eyes widened. "I can't fit through that." "You'll fit," Cole said, already pulling the small pry tool from his belt and jamming it into the crack. The rock shifted slightly. Dirt rained down in a thin stream. Shadow moved to his side, watching the approaching shapes in both directions. His body language was tight, every muscle ready for a fight. Cole worked the tool hard, widening the fissure inch by inch. The noise of breaking dirt and shifting stone echoed too loud, but it was better than the sound of those crawling movements drawing closer. Finally, the gap was just wide enough for the girl's shoulders. "Go," he said. She hesitated only a second before slipping in, twisting her body to squeeze through. Shadow went next without needing a command, his body pressing tight through the narrow space. Cole was halfway through when he heard the first hand slap the dirt directly behind him. It was closer than it should have been. Much closer. He shoved forward, boots scraping against rock, shoulders jamming painfully before popping through. He landed on the other side hard, flashlight beam swinging wildly. They weren't in open air, just another tunnel, slightly wider, angling upward again. The girl was already moving, Shadow right behind her. Cole didn't look back. Not until he felt the warm rush of air on the back of his neck. The new tunnel's incline wasn't steep, but after the squeeze through the fissure, it felt like they were climbing toward oxygen for the first time in hours. The air had that faint, metallic taste of cold, not fresh, not yet, but close enough to give Cole something to push for. The girl moved fast now, her earlier hesitations gone. Shadow stayed glued to her left side, his flank brushing her leg with every step. Cole brought up the rear, rifle forward, flashlight sweeping across the walls and ceiling. The space was wider here, maybe 5 feet across, and the ceiling rose just enough that Cole could stand without ducking. That little shift made it feel safer, and that was dangerous. False comfort killed faster than fear. For 50 yards, the only sound was the shuffle of boots and the occasional crunch of loose grit underfoot. Then Cole heard something he didn't like, a faint patter, irregular, like something lightly tapping the earth above them. He stopped. "Hold." The girl froze. Shadow went still, ears pivoting upward. The tapping wasn't coming from the walls. It was above, directly overhead. Cole swung the flashlight beam upward. The dirt and stone above looked undisturbed, but small bits of loose soil drifted down in a slow trickle. Something was moving up there. Keeping pace. The girl's voice was low, careful. "He doesn't have to be in the tunnels to follow." Cole's stomach turned. "You're telling me he's on top of us now?" She nodded. Shadow's growl rumbled, but it wasn't aimed down the tunnel, it was angled straight up. Cole scanned the ceiling again. The sound wasn't consistent, it shifted from one point to another, never staying long enough to mark. It was like the thing was testing the ground, finding where it was weakest. Then, a sudden, sharp thunk directly above Cole's head. The ceiling bulged downward slightly, just for a fraction of a second, like something heavy had pressed against it. Then it was gone, replaced by the faint hiss of disturbed dirt settling back in place. Cole's mind ran through options fast. If the ceiling gave way, the thing wouldn't just drop in, it would be on top of them in a space too tight to maneuver. "We move." "Fast," Cole ordered. The girl didn't argue. She started forward again, quicker now. The incline steepened slightly, forcing them to lean into it. Shadow kept glancing up as they moved, his hackles high. The tapping followed. Sometimes it was light, almost playful, other times, it hit so hard that small rocks rained down. "Why doesn't it just come through?" Cole asked as they climbed. The girl's answer came between breaths. "Because it likes to chase." Cole swore under his breath. They rounded a bend, and for the first time, Cole saw something promising, a pale glow ahead. Not bright daylight, but the suggestion of an opening where the storm's light filtered through snow. Shadow lunged forward at the sight, tail rigid. The girl followed, but Cole kept scanning the ceiling, waiting for the next hit. It came just before they reached the glow. A deafening crack above them, followed by a chunk of ceiling collapsing in a shower of dirt and rock. Something slid into the tunnel, not the whole creature, but one of those long, pale arms. It landed with a wet thud, the hand curling immediately, fingers digging into the dirt floor. The arm began to pull itself forward, elbow bending wrong, movement jerky but fast. "Go!" Cole shouted. The girl scrambled the last few feet to the opening, Shadow pushing past her to squeeze into the light. Cole backed toward them, rifle aimed, light locked on that arm. It didn't reach for him directly, it hooked into the wall, dragging the rest of its length into view. The shoulder emerged, and beyond it, the faint suggestion of the head. Cole fired once into the dirt beside it, the blast echoing. The arm recoiled just slightly, enough to buy him 2 more steps backward. He reached the opening and shoved the girl upward. She climbed fast, snow cascading down as she scrambled out. Shadow was already through, barking into the storm. Cole turned once more. The head was closer now, the shadow patches for eyes fixed entirely on him. The arm flexed, pulling the bulk forward inch by inch. Cole slung the rifle onto his back and grabbed the edge of the opening. He pulled himself up hard, boots digging into the icy dirt for leverage. Snow hit his face, blinding him for a second as he broke through to the surface. The cold was a shock after the tunnel's oppressive warmth. He rolled to his side, scanning the opening. Nothing followed. The girl was kneeling a few feet away, snow clinging to her hair. Shadow stood between them and the hole, still barking into it. The wind howled, and for a moment, the only sound was the storm. Then, faintly, from under the snow, came that tapping again. It was moving. Not retreating. Circling. The wind tore across the clearing, snatching Cole's breath before he could take a full one. The snow came sideways, hard pellets that stung his face and made the edges of the world vanish into white. The girl crouched low, arms wrapped around herself, blinking against the sting. Shadow stood in front of her, angled toward the wind, his body a shield. His ears were swiveling constantly, catching sounds Cole couldn't hear over the storm. Cole scanned the treeline. There was no sign of movement, no pale shapes between the black trunks, just the shifting veil of snow. But his gut told him it wasn't gone. The girl's voice was barely audible over the gale. "It's still here." Cole didn't ask how she knew. He'd learned by now that her instincts weren't guesses. He motioned toward the thicker cluster of trees to the north. "We move. Storm will cover our tracks." They started forward, leaning into the wind. The snow was knee-deep in places, and each step felt like shoving through sandbags. Cole kept his rifle in one hand, flashlight in the other, even though the beam barely cut more than a few feet into the swirling white. Shadow ranged ahead, never more than a few yards from the girl. Every so often, he'd stop, head cocked, nostrils flaring. Then he'd move again, faster. They'd made it maybe 50 yards before it happened. A sharp whump under the snow, like something heavy shifting below the surface. Cole froze. "Hold." Shadow spun, hackles high, ears locked on a spot to their left. The girl's hand clamped around Cole's sleeve. Another whump, this time directly in front of them, closer. Cole's mind ran back through the tunnels, through the way it had moved without sound until it wanted to be heard. He realized the snow was hiding more than just them. Then the surface ahead of them heaved upward. Not like a drift collapsing, like something rising beneath it. The white bulge swelled, snow sliding off the sides in sheets. Shadow barked, lunging toward the girl to push her back. Cole raised his rifle, but the shape under the snow moved sideways, fast, too fast. It was circling again, just like under the dirt. "Keep moving!" Cole shouted. They caught right, toward the thicker trees. The wind was worse here, funneling through the trunks, but the snow was shallower. For a few moments, it worked, no more movement under the snow. Then, directly behind them, the surface rippled. Cole swung the beam back in time to see a pale hand break through. Fingers spread wide, it pressed flat against the snow's surface, then sank back under, vanishing without a trace. The girl's breathing went ragged. "It's playing with us." Cole didn't answer. He knew she was right. They broke through a narrow line of spruce into a small hollow where the wind dropped to almost nothing. The sudden stillness was unnerving. Shadow paced the perimeter, ears flicking, nose low. The girl huddled under one of the trees, eyes scanning the ground. Cole kept his back to the largest trunk, eyes moving between the tree line and the snow at their feet. For a minute, nothing happened. Then, the snow in the center of the hollow began to sink. Not in a collapse, in a slow, deliberate spiral, like water going down a drain. Shadow lunged toward it, barking furiously. The girl shouted, "No," but it was too late. The dog had broken into the circle of sinking snow. The surface gave way under him. Cole was already moving, rifle slung as he dove forward. He caught Shadow's harness with one hand just as the snow dropped out from under the dog. For a moment, Cole saw it, not the whole thing, just the suggestion of the head and those shadow patch eyes, looking up from a hollow in the ice. The hand reached up, not for the dog, but for Cole's wrist. The touch was ice and weight all at once, like a current pulling down. Cole yanked back hard, every muscle straining. The thing didn't hold on, it let go, and that was somehow worse. He scrambled backward with Shadow, snow pouring into the hole. Within seconds, the surface was smooth again, as if nothing had been there at all. The girl was at his side, eyes wide. "It's not going to stop." Cole was breathing hard. "Then we don't either." He got them moving again, this time hugging the tree line so the roots broke up the ground. It made it harder for anything to move directly beneath them. Shadow stayed tight to the girl now, body brushing hers with each step. Cole brought up the rear, scanning constantly for the smallest change in the snow's surface. They didn't see it again before the ridge. At the top, the trees thinned, revealing a long slope down toward what looked like an old service road. The snow was wind-packed here, smoother, easier to move on. But the open space made Cole uneasy. He looked at the girl. "We move fast and we don't stop. Got it?" She nodded. They started down the slope. The wind was stronger here, pushing them from behind. Shadow led, his paws barely sinking into the crusted snow. Halfway down, the snow shifted. Not in front. Not behind. Under all of them. It happened without warning. The crusted snow under Cole's boots shivered once, then gave way completely. For half a second, his body hung in that strange weightless pause before gravity claimed him. The girl's scream was muffled by the snowstorm, and then everything went white. They didn't fall far, maybe 10 feet, but the landing was hard. Cole hit on his shoulder and rolled, the shock knocking the air from his lungs. Snow poured in around him like sand through a broken hourglass. Shadow landed somewhere to his right, yelping once before scrambling to his feet. The girl slid in next, her coat and hair streaming loose snow. Cole coughed, forcing himself up. His flashlight beam sliced through the swirling white, revealing not the packed earth walls of the tunnels they'd left, but something different, something that had been here far longer. They were in a hollow, wide and low, its walls a strange mixture of ice and stone. The ceiling above was thin, almost translucent, with shadows of snowdrifts shifting across it in the wind. The air was still here, and that made it worse. The girl's breath plumed out in quick bursts. This isn't part of the tunnels. Cole scanned the walls. There were markings in the ice, long, shallow gouges that didn't look like natural cracks. They curved, some looping over each other, and the longer he looked, the more they resembled writing. Not any language he knew. Shadow paced the center of the hollow, nose high, sniffing in quick bursts. His ears weren't aimed at the walls or the ceiling. They were aimed down. Cole felt it too, the faintest vibration in the ice under his boots. It wasn't constant. It pulsed. The girl took a step toward one of the walls, fingertips brushing the grooves in the ice. These aren't just marks. There, she trailed off, brow furrowing. Cole's light swept across the opposite side of the chamber, catching on something embedded in the ice. It was pale, irregular. At first he thought it was a rock, but as the light shifted, so did the shape. It was a face. Not frozen with the smoothness of someone who died in ice, but stretched, as if the ice itself had pulled it long over time. The mouth was open, not in a scream, but in something closer to singing. Cole stepped back. "We're leaving. Now." The girl didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the face, and her lips parted slightly. "Hey!" Cole barked. That snapped her out of it. They turned toward the side where the collapse had happened, but the hole above was already sealing, snow drifting in and packing tight, the wind smoothing the surface from above until there was no sign it had ever been open. They were sealed in. Shadow's growl broke the silence. It was low, not his usual warning, more like a sound he made when another predator was close. The vibration in the ice came again, stronger this time, and now Cole could hear it, a faint hum, deep and resonant, like a massive string being plucked. The girl's eyes darted to the floor. "It's under us." Cole scanned quickly for any other exit, cracks, breaks, anything. There was one narrow split in the far wall, barely a foot wide, and it was rimed with frost so thick it looked solid. He crossed the chamber fast, slung the rifle, and used his shoulder to slam into it. The ice didn't break, it flexed. The hum grew louder. Shadow barked once, sharp, then moved to stand between Cole and the girl. His body was rigid, tail straight, head lowered. His ears tracked something that Cole couldn't see yet. Then, through the floor, came a shadow. It didn't have form exactly, it was a darker distortion under the ice, moving fast. The hum deepened, the vibration making the walls tremble. The girl stepped back until she was against the wall, eyes wide. "It's not coming through the walls. It's coming through the ice." Cole dropped to one knee, running his glove over the floor. The ice was thinning in places, spiderwebbed with cracks. The shadow below moved directly under the girl and stopped. Cole's chest tightened. "Move. Now." She took a step, and the floor beneath her burst upward. Not an arm this time. Not a head. Something else entirely, a long, ribbon-like shape of pale, glistening flesh, twisting as it emerged, the surface slick as ice. It coiled around her ankle before Cole could even raise his rifle. She screamed, kicking hard, but the thing didn't tighten, it pulled, slow but unrelenting, dragging her toward the center of the hollow. Shadow lunged, teeth sinking into the thing just above where it gripped her. A sound like cracking ice filled the space, and the thing recoiled slightly. Cole was already there, grabbing the girl's arms and hauling her backward. The thing resisted, the pull so steady it felt mechanical. Cole drew his knife with his free hand and drove it into the pale flesh. The blade slid in too easily, like cutting through packed snow. The thing shuddered violently, then released, slipping back through the crack in the ice as fast as it had come. The girl collapsed into Cole's chest, sobbing, clutching his jacket. Shadow stood over the spot where it had vanished, growling low, teeth bared. The hum faded. Cole didn't waste time. We find a way out. Now. They turned toward the frost-rimed crack again, and this time, Cole swung the rifle but into it with all his strength. The ice groaned, lines of stress spiderwebbing out from the point of impact. Another hit. Another. The girl joined him, kicking hard, until finally the frost shattered inward, revealing another narrow tunnel. It was dark, colder than anything they'd felt yet, but it led away. Cole shoved her in first, then Shadow, then crawled after them. Behind, in the hollow, the hum began again. The new tunnel was so narrow that Cole had to turn his shoulders sideways to keep moving. The cold here was different, sharper, as if it was being pushed through the rock by something alive. The girl crawled ahead of him, her boots scraping against the uneven floor. Shadow stayed in front of her, tail low but ears forward, moving with the strange certainty that had saved them before. Behind them, the hum from the hollow deepened. It no longer sounded like a vibration in the ice, it was following, closing the distance. Faster, Cole urged. The girl didn't argue. Her hands disappeared into the darkness ahead as she pulled herself forward, and Cole followed, ignoring the way the rock pressed against his ribs. The tunnel angled upward now, the incline sharp enough to burn in his thighs even in the freezing cold. A sudden gust hit them, not from behind, but from above. It was faint, but it smelled like open air. "We're close," Cole said. Shadow barked once, almost like he was confirming it. The girl scrambled faster, and within seconds, Cole saw a pale glow ahead. It wasn't bright sunlight, the storm outside dulled everything, but it was still light. The hum behind them shifted pitch, becoming a sharp, bone-deep rattle. The sound echoed off the narrow walls, making it impossible to tell how close it really was. The girl reached the opening first. She pushed at the snow blocking it, but it was packed hard, crusted with ice. She glanced back at Cole, panic flickering. He slung the rifle and dug in with both hands, clawing at the frozen wall. The ice burned his fingers through his gloves, but it started to crack, small shards breaking away under the force. Shadow squeezed up beside them, paws scratching, helping to break it apart. The rattle grew louder. Cole's heart hammered. He kicked at the snow with his boots, throwing his weight into it until, finally, the crust split. Cold wind poured through, almost knocking him back. He shoved the girl through first. Her body disappeared into the white beyond. Shadow followed, slipping through the gap with a final bark. Cole was halfway through when something closed around his boot. It wasn't like before, no slow, dragging pull. This was fast, violent, yanking him back into the tunnel so hard his knee slammed against the ice. He twisted, catching a glimpse of it, not the pale skin or long arms this time, but something else, a cluster of thin, tendril-like lengths, each tipped with hooked ends that sank into his boot leather. They writhed in unison, pulling. "Cole," the girl's voice came from outside, high with fear. Shadow's head reappeared in the gap, teeth snapping at whatever held him. One of the tendrils lashed upward, catching the dog's muzzle, but Shadow bit down hard enough to make the thing recoil. Cole braced one hand against the ice wall, the other gripping the edge of the opening. He heaved, muscles straining, the tendrils digging in deeper. The hum turned into a screech, the sound so sharp it cut through his skull. With a final lunge, he tore free, snow and ice collapsing into the tunnel as he rolled out into the open. The storm swallowed the sound of the screech instantly, the wind screaming in its place. He scrambled to his feet, pulling the girl up. Shadow stood between them and the opening, barking into the hole as if daring the thing to follow. The snow shifted there, collapsing inward until it was just another drift. The opening was gone. For a long moment, none of them moved. The storm swirled around them, snow biting at any exposed skin. Cole finally looked at the girl. "We move. Now." They started toward what looked like the faint outline of trees through the white. Every step was heavy, but Cole kept glancing back, scanning the snow for the smallest ripple. The wind roared louder, and the ground under them was solid, until it wasn't. A tremor passed through the snow, subtle at first, then stronger. It came from every direction at once. Shadow froze mid-step, head lifting, ears straining. His bark this time was short, sharp, urgent. The girl's hand found Cole's again, gripping tight. "It's not under us," she whispered. Cole frowned. "Then where?" The rest of his sentence vanished as something moved in the storm ahead. It wasn't close, not yet, but it was tall, far taller than a man. The shape swayed slightly, indistinct in the swirling snow, as if the storm itself was holding it together. It stood in the exact line they had to take to reach the treeline. Cole's pulse pounded in his ears. The thing didn't move forward. It didn't have to. The storm kept folding around it, making it impossible to look away. Shadow growled, low and steady. The girl's grip on his hand tightened until it hurt. "Don't let go," she said again, voice shaking. Cole didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the figure in the storm. And then, as if it had been waiting for them to notice, it tilted its head, slow, deliberate. The wind carried the faintest sound to them, almost lost in the roar. It wasn't the hum. It wasn't the rattle. It was breathing.